The sky above Tarsis Prime burned like a dying sun. Wreckage from Earth's fleet crashed through the atmosphere, leaving trails of fire as they fell. Every defense had failed. The once proud ships that guarded the edge of human space were nothing but ashes now. Captain Jace Renner stood inside a concrete bunker carved into the side of a mountain, surrounded by smoke, broken screens, and the screams of wounded soldiers. His uniform was torn, his face cut and dirty, but he refused to sit down or rest. The walls shook again as another orbital blast hit the surface. Alarms screamed in his ears, and the red lights flickered, barely holding on to power. Lieutenant Zhao, her face pale and streaked with blood, reported that the last planetary shield had fallen. The Volari were descending, and they would not stop until everything human was gone. They weren't like other alien races. They didn't conquer, they erased. Tall, silver-skinned beings with glowing eyes, they fought with cold precision, never speaking, never hesitating. Their warships were like floating cathedrals of death, and their gravity-based weapons tore through steel and flesh alike. Jace had watched brave men and women die by the thousands in the skies above, and now only this last bunker remained. He looked at the console, covered in dust and cracked glass, and knew he had no other choice. Deep beneath the mountain lay something terrible, something Earth had buried long ago and promised never to wake. It was called Project Emberlight. It wasn't a weapon in the usual sense. It was older than most remembered, built with technology no one fully understood. Some said it was alive, others said it was cursed, but Jace didn't care anymore. He wasn't trying to win, just didn't want to die quietly. Entered the code hands steady despite everything, and confirmed the launch. Soft sound followed a low hum, not from the machines above, but from the Earth below, far away. On the lead Volari command ship, high in orbit above the burning world, Commander Alira stood alone in her silent chamber. Her body was tall and perfect, designed for war. Her armor shimmered with light, and her eyes glowed like suns. She had led hundreds of battles and never lost. But now she paused. Something had changed. Signal strange and old rose from the planet. It was like a memory trapped in the stone calling out to her. Volari did not feel fear, but this made her curious. She stepped toward the glass wall and looked down at the world crumbling beneath her. What are the humans hiding? She whispered. Below, Jace stood tall, the bunker shaking around him, explosions rumbling above like thunder. He didn't expect to survive. But maybe, just maybe, this one last spark of humanity's forgotten fire would make the Volari remember that humans were never so easy to wipe away. As he stared up through the cracked ceiling and the falling debris, he clenched his fists, not in despair, but in quiet defiance. If Earth had to burn, it would burn like a star bright, proud, and unforgettable. Commander Alira stepped onto the black glass floor of her ship's control chamber, her long form wrapped in living armor that shimmered like the edge of a blade. The Volari warships hovered above Tarsis Prime in perfect stillness, their presence like a shadow across the world. They had crushed the human fleets in orbit and burned their defenses to dust, but something had changed. Deep in her mind, Alira felt a pulse, not a message, but a memory, one that was not hers. She had never known confusion before. The Volari were born and bred for clarity, for obedience, for silent precision. But the moment the strange human signal rose from the mountain, the chamber around her seemed colder, eyes golden, sharp, emotionless, narrowed. She gave the command to descend, and though her advisors questioned the need, none dared oppose her. A Volari commander never entered a war zone personally, yet something strange pulled her downward. The dropship carved through the red sky fires, dancing across its hull as it passed through the thick smoke of war. Below, the last human base clung to the edge of survival. It was broken, scorched, and surrounded, but not yet dead. Human soldiers, despite their defeat, still fought back with ruined machines and shaking hands. They were loud, messy, and filled with something the Volari had forgotten long ago, desperation mixed with hope. Like a specter, untouched by the chaos. Her soldiers moved around her, cutting through human lines with deadly silence. Bodies fell. Blood soaked the soil. Still the humans didn't run, and that's when she saw him. Among the fire and stones stood a man, tall and wounded, yet proud. His face was covered in dirt and blood, and his eyes burned with defiance. He aimed a weapon at her, though it was useless against her armor. Their eyes locked, and time seemed to slow. Her name was never spoken, but she felt something strange pass between them. He turned and retreated into the broken mountain base, limping, but not falling. She followed, alone. The structure groaned under her feet, its lights flickering like dying stars. He was leading her somewhere. She should have killed him. She knew this. But still she walked deeper and deeper, past the dead and the dying, into the dark. Around her, ancient machines lay quiet and forgotten. And then the pulse struck her again, stronger this time. Wasn't just calling it, was recognizing her. She reached a chamber lit by a pale blue glow, and there he stood, waiting. He was breathing hard, injured, his hand resting on a cracked wall. She stepped forward, calm and cold. "You activated something," she said, her voice smooth like metal. He nodded slowly, looking her directly in the eyes. "You're standing in its heart," he said. And then, with a small smile, he looked at her differently. Not like an enemy, not like a soldier, but like a person. "You have beautiful eyes." The words hit her like a strike she never saw coming. Elira froze. Of all the things she expected, a trap, an attack, even silence, this was something she had no response for. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not in battle, not in peace. Her kind didn't use words like that. Her kind didn't feel things like that. She stared at him, confused for the first time in her life, her body still and her mind suddenly unsure. He didn't speak again, just stood there, watching her, as if waiting to see what she would become. The mountain rumbled once more, and far below, the strange old machine hummed louder, reacting not to war.
Acting.
ChatGPT said, "Deep below the surface of the mountain, beyond the reach of light and sound, something ancient stirred." Project Emberlight was not made of steel and wires alone. It was built from something deeper, something living, born from both human invention and forgotten knowledge. It had slept in silence for generations, its power locked away after a war long erased from history. But now, because of one man's desperate decision and one alien's quiet curiosity, it had begun to wake. Lights blinked to life inside the old chamber as the floor vibrated with energy. Dust fell from the ceiling like snow. A strange hum filled the air, soft at first, but growing louder, deeper, like a voice remembering how to speak. Captain Jace stood beside the glowing console, watching as the energy rose. His wounds ached, but he stayed on his feet. Across from him, Commander Illyra stood frozen, still trying to understand what had just happened. The moment he had spoken the words about her eyes still echoed in her mind. She didn't know why those simple words affected her so much, but something inside her, something buried under centuries of cold control, had trembled. And now the signal that had drawn her here pulsed again, not from the human, but from the thing awakening beneath them. A low voice, mechanical but warm, filled the chamber. Human voice print detected. "Amberlight online?" Illyra's body stiffened. She had never heard anything like it. She looked at Jace, but he didn't seem surprised. "I told you," he said, breathing heavily. "We buried it because we feared what it could do. But now, maybe it's our only chance." Lyra stepped forward slowly, her golden eyes scanning the ancient technology. And she felt something strange in the air, familiar, yet distant. And then, without warning, the machine turned its attention to her. "Volari genetic structure detected," the voice said. "Signal recognized. Dual lineage confirmed. Welcome, authorized user." Her heart, if she could call it that, skipped something like a beat. "That's not possible," she whispered. "Your kind destroyed all records of Earth. We were never part of this." Jace looked at her with calm sadness. "Maybe someone didn't want you to remember." The light around them shifted, brighter now, casting dancing shadows across the walls. The console extended to handprints, one shaped for a human, one shaped for something else, something almost like hers. They both hesitated. The air was thick with energy and unspoken truth. Illyra stepped closer. Her fingers hovered over the glowing shape, unsure. "What is this?" she asked. Jace met her eyes. "It's not just a weapon, it's memory." "What?" "Maybe... It's a key." She slowly placed her hand on the console. Jace did the same. A surge of light wrapped around them, rising like fire. The walls vanished. The floor dissolved. They were no longer standing in a room, but floating in space. Surrounded by images that moved like smoke stars, planets, wars, faces. It was the past Earth and Valari, working side by side, long ago, sharing knowledge, building peace. Then something changed. Cold machines. Sharp decisions. War without feeling and silence. Illyra watched it all, her body still, her mind shaking. They weren't just enemies. They had been partners once. Friends, maybe more. But some choice or fear had shattered that bond. And now here, they were standing in the ruins of forgotten trust, connected not by orders, but by chance. The images faded, and the room returned. Lyra pulled her hand back slowly, breathing hard, as if something heavy had just been lifted from her chest. Jace didn't speak. He didn't need to. They both knew what they had seen, what they had been, and maybe what they still could be. The voice of Emberlight returned, calm and steady. Dual operators confirmed. Link established. Awaiting command. The chamber glowed brighter, ready. Outside, the world burned. But inside this old machine, something new had begun. A deep silence filled the chamber after the light faded. But it wasn't an empty silence, it was the silence before something powerful happened. Jace stood still, his breathing heavy, his hands still tingling from the strange energy that had passed through him. Across from him, Illyra slowly lowered her arm, her golden eyes glowing softer now, as if something inside her had changed. Around them, Emberlight pulsed gently, like a living heart that had waited too long to be remembered. The air was charged, full of heat and memory. Illyra looked down at the floor, then up at the machine, and then at Jace. Her voice was quiet. Almost unsure, she asked, "What did it mean, those images? That history? We were never told any of it." Jace didn't move, but his voice carried the weight of a man who had waited years to say these words. "It means the war isn't what we thought it was. It means you weren't made to destroy us." He stepped forward slowly. "You were made with us." Illyra looked at him, and for once, her face was not hard or unreadable. She looked confused, hurt, the kind of look that said her world had been shattered by the truth. She whispered, "But they said we were born from the stars, pure and alone." Jace shook his head gently. "No one is born alone. Not truly." Emberlight's voice returned then, smooth and calm, emotional sync level rising, neural pathways merging, memories stabilizing. Opening phase 2, the walls of the chamber cracked with light, and the floor shifted under their feet as the structure rose. Outside, above the mountain, a massive glow burst from the ground. A column of energy, wide as a city tower, shot straight into the sky, splitting clouds and shaking the atmosphere. On the battlefield, both human and Valari soldiers paused, weapons lowered, heads turned. It was something none of them had ever seen, a light too beautiful to be a weapon and too strong to be ignored. Valari ships in orbit registered a massive energy buildup. Some prepared to fire, others hesitated, unsure. On the ground, Jace and Illyra stood side by side on a rising platform, the world spreading out around them. Wind tore at their clothes and armor. Jace looked over at her. "You feel it, don't you? It's not just a weapon, it's alive." Illyra said nothing at first. Then slowly she nodded. "It remembers us, both of us." It was waiting. Above them, the energy beam shifted in color, now glowing with a strange mix of human red and Valari silver. A signal shot across the stars. For the first time in memory, the machines aboard Valari ships hesitated. Some systems shut down. Others reactivated old data that hadn't been accessed in 10,000 years. Forgotten orders, forbidden truths. Ships began to respond differently. Some stopped moving. Some pulled back. Others turned their weapons on their own kind. Illyra's voice rang out, not with command, but with clarity. If they lied to me, then they lied to all of us. She turned to Jace. We need to speak to the fleet. Together, he said, as one. Emberlight opened a channel, one that reached every ship, every soldier, every being on the battlefield. Jace and Illyra stood in the light, their voices carried by the machine's power. This war was built on silence, Jace said. But the truth speaks now, Illyra followed. We are not your enemy. We are your forgotten past, and your future if you choose to see it. There was no reply at first, just silence across the stars. Then one by one, lights blinked out across the enemy fleet, not from destruction, but from surrender. Machines powered down, beams vanished, the war paused. But it wasn't over, not yet. One ship remained the largest Volari dreadnought, untouched by the signal. It fired. A final beam, a death strike aimed straight for the mountain. On the platform, Jace reached for Illyra's hand. She didn't pull away. Her fingers closed around each other as the sky turned white with the light of the oncoming blast. We won't survive that, Jace said. Illyra turned toward him, her voice steady. Then let's face it. ... together. Emberlight pulsed, not in fear, but in purpose. It had waited long enough. The beam reached them. But instead of death, a flash of impossible energy exploded outward, not destroying the mountain, but erasing the beam. The attacking warship didn't survive the return pulse. It vanished into light, gone in a blink. And in the silence that followed, the skies above Tarsi's were finally still. The skies were quiet now, but the silence was not peaceful. It was the silence of change, deep and heavy. The energy from Emberlight had faded back into the mountain, leaving behind only a soft glow in the clouds. The battlefield had stopped. Moving, human soldiers stood frozen with weapons in hand, unsure if they were still fighting. Volari warriors, tall and sharp in their silver armor, stood still as well, no longer firing, no longer advancing. Something had shifted between them. The great machine beneath the mountain had spoken a truth that neither side could ignore. In the mountain's heart, Jace and Illyra stood together, breathing hard. Both changed in ways they didn't fully understand yet. The chamber's walls shimmered again, and Emberlight pulled them once more into its light. Around them, a new set of visions formed clearer, this time sharper. They weren't just old memories. These were answers. They saw Earth, thousands of years ago, not alone in the galaxy, but in alliance with others. The Volari had not always been distant, cold machines of war. Long ago, they were Elise partners. Humans and Volari built wonders together, fought darkness together, and created something powerful, Emberlight itself. Power brought fear. Fear brought silence. Decision was made, somewhere by someone one side. Cut the bond, erased the memory, and turned allies into enemies. The Volari were changed, their emotions removed, their memories locked away. Over time, they forgot what they once were, what they had once loved. Jace stood quietly as these truths passed before him, but his heart ached. All the years of war, all the lives lost, and it was all because of one choice to forget. Illyra was shaking now, not from fear, but from something more painful. They lied to us, she whispered, voice raw. Everything we were taught. Everything I believed. Jace turned toward her. You can change it, we both can. She didn't answer right away. Her glowing eyes stared at the fading memories, her body still and cold. But something inside her was burning now, a spark that hadn't been lit in generations. Why me? She asked softly. Why am I the one who remembers? Jace stepped closer, his voice calm. Because maybe you were the only one who could see the truth and still stand, Emberlight responded. To their thoughts, shifted, offering one more gift. A command system lit up, one that could speak to every Volari ship still listening. Illyra stared at it, her hand trembling. Jace reached for it with her. Her fingers touched again, and the machine connected. In the sky above, thousands of Volari ships received a message not from a superior, but from someone who had remembered who she really was. Lyra's voice, broadcast across every channel, spoke not like a machine, but like someone alive. "I am Commander Lyra of the Valari. I have seen our past. I have touched the truth. We were not born alone. We were not born to destroy. We were born together with humanity. They are not our enemy. They are our forgotten kin." On every ship, Valari heard her words and paused. Some looked confused. Some removed their helmets and simply stood there, lost in thought. Others fell to their knees. And across the battlefield, human and Valari soldiers lowered their weapons. Jace watched her speak and saw something rare and powerful in her. Leader not of war, but of peace. A warrior who had remembered her heart. She turned to him after the broadcast, her eyes softer now. "What comes next?" she asked. Jace smiled, tired but sure. "That depends on us. Both of us." Outside, the stars above Tarses no longer burned with war. The war wasn't over yet, not completely, but for the first time. The truth had spoken louder than fear, and it had been heard. The skies above Tarses were no longer filled with fire, but with silence and waiting. Both human and Valari forces stood across the battlefield, unsure of what to do, caught in the space between old war and new understanding. Ships that once burned planets now floated quietly, their weapons cold. On the surface, soldiers who had once tried to kill each other now stared across the lines without hate. But peace is never easy, and not everyone was ready to accept it. High above the planet, one last Valari dreadnought remained untouched by Lyra's message. It was older, colder, and ruled by commanders who still believed in destruction, not unity. They rejected the truth, calling it a trap, and saw Lyra as broken. They gave no warning. They simply fired. A massive energy beam burst from the ships. Core aimed straight at the mountain where Emberlight glowed and where Jace and Lyra still stood. The beam was death pure, bright and fast, cut through the sky like a blade, heading for the surface with impossible speed. Inside the mountain, alarms blared, and Emberlight's voice echoed across the chamber. "High energy strike detected. 70 seconds to impact." Jace turned to Lyra. He knew what that beam could do. It wasn't just a weapon. It was meant to end everything Emberlight, the truth, and them. "We can't stop that," he said. Breath heavy, eyes locked on the sky. Not in time. Lyra stared at the beam on the display, her mind racing. "There has to be a way." Emberlight spoke again, calm but final. "Defensive shield not available. Recommend emergency shutdown to protect internal data." Jace clenched his fists. "No, if it shuts down, the truth dies with us." Lyra stood still for a moment, thinking, feeling, remembering. Then, slowly, she turned to the core and placed her hand on it again. Jace looked at her in shock. "What are you doing?" "I remember something," she said, voice steady. "There's a part of Emberlight that was locked. Only a full Valari human link can open it." Jace stepped forward. "Not just Valari," she nodded. "And you're not just human now. We're both more than that." Without another word, he placed his hand beside hers. The core responded instantly. Light burst out, filling the chamber, wrapping around them like fire and ice. Their minds touched again, not just with memories, but with meaning. Emberlight roared to life, and the machine spoke with more power than ever before. "Emergency." Fusion mode unlocked. Final defense enabled. The chamber shook as energy rushed upward through the mountain. On the surface, the light column returned, brighter and wilder than before. The beam from the dreadnought struck the column and stopped. It didn't destroy the mountain, it shattered instead, scattering into harmless light across the sky. The energy returned upward, fast and sharp. It struck the dreadnought. One moment, it was there. The next, it was gone, disintegrated, erased by the power of something ancient and angry. The remaining Valari ships, seeing the fate of their last commander, sent out surrender codes. Across Tarses, soldiers dropped their weapons, not in fear, but in relief. Inside Emberlight, Jace and Lyra collapsed to the ground, drained but alive. Their hands still touched. They didn't speak, didn't need to. Outside, the people of Earth and the Valari survivors looked up, and saw the sky was clear at last. And for the first time in 1,000 years, it felt like the beginning of another war, but of something new. ChatGPT said. Soft wind moved across the quiet plains of Tarses, carrying with it the scent of ash, metal, and something new peace. The smoke had faded from the sky, the fires had gone out, and the battlefield was now filled with silence, not fear. Soldiers from both sides wandered among the ruins, searching not for enemies but for answers. The Valari ships remained in orbit, their weapons powered down, their crews waiting for new orders that hadn't come yet. On the ground, people gathered near the base of the mountain, where Ember Light had released its final light, unsure of what they would find. A team of human medics and curious Valari officers moved carefully into the lower tunnels, guided by faint pulses from Ember Light's core. When they reached the central chamber, they found two figures lying on the floor still, quiet and holding hands. Captain Jace Renner's body was bruised and worn, but he was alive, chest rising slowly. Beside him was Commander Illyra, her armor dim and cracked, her silver skin pale. She was breathing, but barely. They had survived the blast, but only because they had become something more than human or Valari. The medics carried them out together, one stretcher for both. Days passed. Tarses healed. Messages were sent to Earth and to the remaining Valari homeworlds. Peace talks began not in war rooms, but in open spaces under starlight. Soldiers shared food. Children played near broken war machines. Scientists from both sides walked together, studying the ruins of Emberlight and trying to understand what had happened. And in a quiet room inside the main human medical station, Jace opened his eyes. His body ached, and his memories felt like dreams. But the first thing he saw was Illyra, sitting beside his bed, watching him. Her eyes were no longer hard and glowing. They were gentle now, full of thought. She wore no armor, only a simple cloth uniform given by the humans. Her voice was quiet and soft. You're awake. Jace smiled a little, wincing at the pain. Still alive. Didn't expect that. She nodded. Neither did I. He tried to sit up, but she gently stopped. You need rest. He looked at her hand on his chest, then up into her face. So do you? Illyra looked away, unsure. Then slowly she said, something changed in me. When we connected with Emberlight, when I saw what we had lost, I felt everything. Pain, anger, hope. She paused. And then you said something. To me, something no one had ever said. Jace's smile grew. I meant it, you know what? She asked, though she already knew. It's your eyes, he said. They were ... beautiful. She looked down for a long moment. Her hands folded in her lap. Then finally she looked at him again. Her voice shook just slightly. I didn't know how to respond. Not then. I didn't even know what it meant to feel something beautiful. We were taught never to feel, but you do now, Jace said softly. Illyra nodded once. Yes, I think I do. Outside the window, two suns rose above the hills, painting the world in gold. Jace turned his head slightly, watching the light touch the ruins of war. It's strange, he said. All this fighting, all this loss, and in the end, it was just about remembering who we were. Not enemies, not strangers. Just people who forgot how to listen. Illyra stood slowly, then extended her hand. Then let's start remembering. Together. Jace took her hand. It was warm, strong, and steady. He stood beside her, still tired, but ready? Outside, others waited, soldiers, leaders, people from both races watching what would come next. And as Jace and Illyra stepped out of the building, side by side, they didn't speak as commanders or heroes. They walked forward as something better to souls who had crossed stars and fire to find each other. And in that walk, the future of two worlds began.